Let's move on to the final email of the day.
All right, last one is from Jindra V. It's hard to believe we're only a couple of months away from Avengers Endgame finally coming. There are a lot of people theorizing about how the consequences of Infinity War get undone, time travel, the gauntlet, and stuff like that. The big question I find myself wondering about is who kills Thanos? There are a lot of characters with big motives to do it. So if Thanos dies in Endgame, who do you think is the one that does it?
All right, so you're right. There have been a whole ton of theorizing about a whole bunch of different topics when it comes to Avengers Endgame, not the least of which is how do the events of Infinity War get undone? Is it the snap gets undone? Do they create an alternate reality? Is time travel involved? There's all these big questions going on. And by the way, it's not just a question of who kills Thanos. I believe there's still a question about even if Thanos dies and if that becomes a big thing in the movie or not. That being said, if we're going to go on the assumption, okay, let's assume for a second that Thanos does meet his end in this. Let's say he plays at least a certain size of a role in the film, and he actually finally meets his end at somebody else's hands. Well, whose hands does he fall to? Because there's a number of, like, if this was a murder mystery, who killed Thanos, there's a lot of people with motive. There's a lot of people with motive in this mystery movie here. And so I want to present to you who I believe would be the 8 most likely people if Thanos does die, and we're just going to take that as a granted for a moment, okay? Just for the sake of the discussion. If Thanos does die, who wipes him out? I'm going to say there's 8 potentials here, Rob. One, the obvious one is Thanos. Is Thor. The obvious one is Thor. Because really, Avengers Infinity War was about Thanos and Thor. And it starts with Thanos and Thor. It ends with Thanos and Thor. Then, I told you you'd die for that. And, and of course, then we see in the trailer that it looks like Thor has traveled to the world that Thanos is retired on, right? So that's got to lend in there. Also, a big potential guy is Iron Man. I mean, Iron Man talked all throughout Infinity War. Thanos has been in my head since the attack on New York, blah, blah. Thanos knew his name. They had that big fight at the end. They left him there to die. Well, first of all, he ran him through and killed him. Almost killed him. And then left him there to die. Hulk went toe-to-toe with Thanos. First straight up loss that the Hulk ever took in a fight. All that kind of stuff. And there's drama going on with Hulk right now. That could lead to that. Nebula is an obvious one, suffering at the hands of Thanos her whole life, having body pieces ripped off and replaced with technology. She came this close, Thanos said, to killing him on his own ship. She snuck onto his ship, came that close to killing him, and of course then he tortured her and killed her sister. Big motives there. Speaking of the death of the sister, Star-Lord. Star-Lord is part Celestial. So, I mean, there's an argument to be made. Remember, he's one of the guys who held an Infinity Stone in his hand. He held the Power Stone in his hand. So there's stuff for that. Speaking of which, Gamora. Gamora didn't die in the snap. Don't forget that. She died in a ritualistic sacrifice for the Soul Stone, which some people believe might lead to something else. I'm not saying it's likely, but I think if you're going to create a list of usual suspects, I think Gamora has to be considered one of your front runners. Also an obvious one, Captain Marvel. She's making her debut in the MCU here in the Captain Marvel movie. Kevin Feige has said this character is going to be the most powerful character in the MCU. They might do a little bit of setting up with Thanos in the Captain Marvel movie. She's got to be taken into consideration. And then our dark horse in this, our big dark horse in this, would be Hawkeye. And those are the eyes of a hurt man, ladies and gentlemen. Those are the eyes of a man in pain. He lost his family from Thor. That could be enough. And by the way,
Thanos.
Sorry, I keep interchanging Thanos and Thor.
It's tough.
He lost his family at the hands of the Thanos' snap, we're assuming. And remember, this wouldn't be the first time in a comic book story where some low-powered archer takes out a supreme super being. Back in the Parallax stuff. Do you remember this, Rob? Back during the Parallax stuff when Green Lantern just went nuts and all this kind of stuff. It was Green Arrow. It was Oliver Queen that ultimately planted an arrow in his heart. In the comic series. So
after he turned off the sun.
Yes. So I believe these are our usual suspects. Rob, let me throw it over to you. Who would you say are your top 1 or 2 out of this list of usual suspects? And is there anybody you think I may have left off this list that should be considered one of the suspects?
Well, I don't think Thanos is going to die. because he is
Sure,
a Titan,
yeah.
and I think they're going to use Thanos. If there's an Eternals movie, and they're going to use Thanos, I think, as a bridging device into dealing more with the Eternals and more with the Celestials. That's just a guess, but I think if they're going to have somebody kill Thanos, I think it's going to be, it would be Nebula would be my guess, because we actually saw what he did to her. And, it's very mythic having a daughter come back and slay her father.
Yep.
In a way. But I don't think, here's the thing. If one of these characters were to kill Thanos, especially Thor or Stark, what does that say about them as characters? Like, even though Thanos eliminated half the universe, once you've essentially murdered someone, it's hard to bring a character back from that unless you're going to play out I know you're supposed to kill the villain in a movie like Die Hard. You can throw Hans Gruber off the roof of the Nakatomi Plaza and it's no big deal. But these are our superheroes, that embody, the Avengers are supposed to embody all that is good about sentient beings throughout the universe. Whereas Nebula can get away with it. People aren't going to be like, oh. But then again, if Gamora doesn't come back, Star-Lord has a good reason, because he too is a half Celestial, as you pointed out. I don't think Captain Marvel would kill Thanos, because they just introduced her. And I don't see her doing that unless it's, I don't know. I just don't think any of these characters are really going to do it. Thanos isn't going to die. I think we've got a dark horse villain that we know nothing about.
I want them to do like a Murder on the Orient Express situation.
Who killed Thanos? Who did it? But
I watched that movie.
What?
Rob, I think you're missing something here. I think you're missing something important with this whole notion that, but these are heroes. Do you know how many, if you go back and watch the Iron Man movies, do you know what the body count is at the hands of Tony Stark? You know how many people he's killed? Just go back and watch a Civil War, even the opening of Civil War. In that opening scene in Sokovia, you know how many people the Avengers straight up kill? And then,
Did they kill him?
Oh yeah, yeah. You go back and watch that opening; they killed a number of them. And let's not forget Infinity War. In the great speech, one of the best dramatic moments in the history of the MCU, Thor sitting down and he's got Rocket Raccoon there, and Thor says, "I am 1,500 years old, and I've killed twice as many."
Yeah,
and he goes, he's killed thousands of fools across, like, I say thee nay, all that kind of stuff. I am, by the way, not closed off to your way of thinking that Thanos doesn't die in the movie. Like, I totally believe that is a viable possibility that we're going to get an Endgame, that Thanos does not die. I'm completely open that might be the case. I'm just saying that if he was going to die, I'm going to go Nebula.
Yeah, me too. I have to go that way.
I think if it's gonna be any of them, it's gonna be Nebula. But the one big piece of evidence, though, Robert, that goes for the Thor thing is that shot that you pointed out in the trailer. That it looked like that shot from behind of Thor. That he's on the same world that Thanos went to.
If? Well, sorry. I was going to say, go ahead. What if, I talked earlier, a couple shows back, about how maybe the movie opens with Thor and Thanos talking.
Yep.
What if the movie opened with Thor, after that conversation, burying Stormbreaker in Thanos' head? And he's okay with it. Like, Thor straight up kills Thanos in the opening scene of the movie. Then the audience their jaws are going to be on the floor, just like when Thanos killed Loki. And everyone's going to be like, where the fuck do we go next? Yeah. Like, what are we going to do? Yeah. If that's the way to open a movie, you want, and I wouldn't put it past these guys. And Thanos just allows it. Thanos is like, hey man, I did what I was here to do. What am I going to? I'm going to smell the flowers. I've been here for a month and I'm a little tired of it. And Thor's like, I'm going to go for the headshot. He's like, do your best. And Thor just straight up kills Thanos and then the titles come on. Avengers Endgame. I'd make that movie.
Yeah, because Thanos would be like, hey, I already saved the universe. Go ahead. In his own. But let me ask you, Ash, if you had this big list of, usual suspects here in front of you, if you had to guess, assuming for a minute that Thanos dies, if he's going to die, which one would you say is going to be the one to do it?
I thought it was going to be a Nebula Gamora combo. Like, if Gamora comes back, And then Nebula and them, they confront him at the same time, and it ends in a battle, and they both kill him. I think that would be like the most emotional way to go.
And now I heard
And
somebody mentioned to me on Twitter, but John, you know, the Russo said the gauntlet is permanently damaged, and without the gauntlet, Thanos isn't a threat anymore, so they don't need to kill him. It's like, not a threat. Before he got the gauntlet, Nebula and Gamora were talking stories about how we went around the galaxy wiping out half the population planet by planet by planet. Just because you don't have a working gauntlet doesn't mean he ain't a threat.
Mm-hmm.
He's still the most powerful being in the universe, according to the lore there. Anyway, all right, guys. Well, what do you guys say? Who, if, just assuming for a moment, if Thanos dies, who do you think is going to be the one that ultimately does the deed and takes him out? Jump down to the comment section below. I want to know what you guys think about that. Okay, guys, with all that out of the way, we're going to take some time now and take some live